Hello, my name is Micah Hughes. In the article entitled Jonathan Edwards in the 20th Century, Dr. Kenneth P. Mangum traces the impact the work and life of Jonathan Edwards has had upon the academic world as well as in the religious community. Beginning with the first consideration of Edwards within academic culture, he cites in his first dissertation in 1899, conducted at the University of Halle, followed by the first American dissertation written in 1904 at Boston University. As general observation, he states that from the 1900s to the 1930s, the degree of scholarships on Edwards was lacking. The public perception of Edwards at the time felt that he believed in the worst God, preached the worst sermons, and had the worst religion of any human being who ever lived on our continent. But as more academic scholars unraveled the works of Jonathan Edwards, the public began to see, as did Gerald McDermott in Understanding Jonathan Edwards, an introduction to American theology, beauty, not wrath, was at the center of his vision of God. Then the tide began to change in the 1920s as Harvard historians began academic exploration of the Puritans, followed by Perry Miller's New England Mind in 1949. The influence of Edwards in the 20th century eventually impacted the disciplines of homiletics, revivalism, missionology, philosophy, history, and theology. Homiletics. In the late 18th and 19th century, had small but consistent focus on the preaching style and sermon analysis of Edwards. As the 20th century evolved, there became a greater interest in mining Edwards' sermons that dealt with Edwards' theory of preaching or using sermons as a source for plumbing his thoughts on a particular practice or topic. Revivalism. Edwards' involvement in it and influence in the revivals began to appeal to scholars in the 50s and 60s, but began to double in the 70s. The speculation for the surge was the bicentennial of 1976, with the links made between the revolution and the effect of Edwards on the Great Awakening. Missionology. Due to Edwards' connections with David Brainerd and his biography, The Life of David Brainerd, interest that had been dormant for many decades was on the rise in the 1940s as scholars began to make connections between revivalism and the missionary movement. Edwards' work had inspired many to embrace the mission field in the early days. Philosophy. With Perry Miller's effort to treat Edwards philosophically, respect was won for Edwards by downplaying his Christianity, detaching the philosophy from his theology, and making him more modern. The tide turned upward in the 1960s. History and theology. It is clear that those two disciplinary groups are dominating in Edwards academics today. There is obviously some overlap. Some cross-fertilization between these two categories, which is encouraging because it is the relationship between these two groups that will set the course of Edwards' studies on the near future, as stated by Joseph Hurtuni in Douglas L. Wood's The Philosophical Theology of Jonathan Edwards. Mysticism and logic, delight in discourse, emotion and thought were united one with another in Edwards' mind to produce writings which is poetry, philosophy, theology, all at once. Thank you.